Um, Thanks for welcoming me here. So, as most of you probably know, today we're going to do a bit of a Q&A on relationships. Just first say that the aim today is to discuss the questions that you have all put towards me, and thank you very much for all the questions that came in. We had quite a lot, actually. This is how many questions we had. So, I don't know if I'll get through them all tonight, but they did kind of... Look, I'm sure we can discuss... if you're happy to speak up tonight, do you want to be anonymous? Let's see how we do that. Maybe we'll have a part two. Yeah. So, there were quite a lot, but I ended up categorising them because a lot of them were very... kind of fell onto, the overlapped. Yeah, they fell into kind of similar things. Let me just first of all say, I am in no way an expert in relationships, so please do not compare me with Wanda last week. She is absolutely the guru when it comes to relationships. What I'm presenting to you today is from experience personally, socially, and within the church. Yeah. All right, so these are the categories that I basically put the questions in. So basically, the first category was, where to go before you're actually in a relationship. So, you're ready to be in one. How do you know what is the right one? The second category was more about the person in particular. How do I know if they're the right one? How do I know how to choose? How do I know, how to separate options, things like that. Then we come to dating, so we'll kind of cover things like stigmas, intimacy, and kind of external input, so other people's involvement. And then there was a few questions about the marriage ceremony and within the marriage itself. And there was a couple of added kind of curly ones. All right, so first of all, let's talk about the relationship itself. So this category of questions was basically, I'll give you the questions. So these are the two. How do you know when to pursue a relationship and how to pursue it? Second one was, I'm a control freak. How do I let go of control in this situation, leave it all to God, and trust that it will happen in the right time? Very appropriate questions, I would say, because you're talking about the rest of your life. So understandable anxiety with what to do before you actually get into a relationship. Let me first say, before I thought it might be good to actually get real life examples of people who are married. So I did a little bit of research myself and did a bit of a survey. So the people I surveyed were married people. Obviously I won't mention any names, but married people, you may or may not know them, but they basically ranged from being married under a year to 10 years of marriage. And I'll give you some answers to some questions that I asked them. So one of the questions that I asked was, what do you think best prepared you for your relationship, i.e. how do you know you were ready to be in one? So I'll give you some answers that they gave. One said, being content with who I was before getting in a relationship. Any potential partner really had to add something to my life because I was genuinely happy as is. I was happy on my own, so I didn't settle for anything. Someone else said, I realised I was ready when I discovered that I had more to give someone, that I could commit to the growth of something mutual. What prepared me for that was time spent alone, determining who I was outside of that, or at least who I wanted to be. Someone else said, we were both completely content with our lives before we got together, and there was no extreme desire or need to be in a relationship. So when it came about, it took us by surprise, but at that time, it felt completely from God and perfect. And the last one said, I never wanted to get married. I had big dreams of working abroad, so I wasn't prepared to like that person, let alone love them. God definitely changed my heart, my desires, and answered our little prayer when we were both seeking his will. So, the reason I'm giving you survey answers to married people is because this is your aim, all right? Let's talk about relationships in our community, or in our community, let's call it that, we see them as very serious things. Can we just put that as kind of the baseline? Our version of dating or a relationship is for an end goal, okay? We're not here talking about dating as in just kind of having fun and no real serious plans, okay? So it's important to see people who have made it and have been on the other side and what their experiences are, looking back to dating. Because as hard as it might seem to look that far into the future, your courtship or dating or even engagement phase of your relationship is like you're not even scratching the surface, okay? So just look at that in terms of length of time or like quality of the relationship. It's not even like 0.5%, but it is so important because it sets you up, okay? So I'm not downplaying courtship and relationships. I'm saying it's really important, but it's not the goal is not to get married. The goal is to have a successful marriage. Yeah? On the same page? Sweet. Okay. So, basically, let's say that really to get into a good relationship, to find the relationship, the key thing is to find the one. And this is what everyone knows. We have to find the one. How do I find the one? Okay? If you look at dating in the modern, context, relative to how marriage was done in time, dating is relatively new. So it's only really been done this way, where you court a person or you date a person or you get to know them before engagement, say the last 100 years, if that. Okay? So there is a coincidence with this. I'm not saying A plus B equals C, but what I will say is it a coincidence that these days people are getting married later in life with more reservations and less success? Think about that, okay? The stats all tell us that people are definitely older when they get married, that there are more divorce rates, and there's a lot more trial and error before people actually settle down and marry. So we got to think about this, okay? You've got to think things through. We have to be open to, maybe not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying dating is wrong today. I'm not going to say those words at all. But we need to question today's model of dating and how it's done and why it's done. Proverbs 4:26 says, "Ponder the path of your feet and let all your ways be established." So a wise man once said, if you travel the same road as everyone else, you will end up at the same destination. So if you want the outcome of your relationship to be something meaningful and lasting and outside of those majority statistics, then you need to think about how you go about doing it. So if you want something that you've never had, you need to do something that you've never done. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we keep going. We are led to believe in today's day and age that finding the one is the key to your relationship. And I know I said that before. Finding the one is the key. But we have to be clear about who the one is. Okay? Who is the one? The one should always be God. That person is your one. If you do not have God as your foundation in your relationship, any relationships, let alone dating, that house will crumble without a foundation. Okay? So, a lot of those answers in those surveys were based on the fact that God led them to that relationship. It wasn't their own pursuit. None of those answers were, I was ready. Yep. Done what I needed to do in life, and I was ready to settle down. And I went and found it, and I nailed it. Sorry for the pun. But no one answered it that way. Okay? It was all about really trusting in God and knowing that He will supply all of your needs according to His riches. Okay? So if we read that verse, it says, "My God shall supply all of your needs according to His riches." So the problem with putting the stock all on the person, your partner, is even if your partner is actually perfect and does everything right all the time, never has a bad day, never treats you badly, never is frustrated, that person's not going to be there all the time. So you cannot put all of your hope into one person, because humans are fallible. Yeah? It's only God that can really meet all of your needs. Put it this way. Pursuit in anything over God is idolatry. So we think idols kind of were abolished in the Bible. You know, there are no more idols these days. Anything you pursue that has a higher priority in your life than God is idolatry of that thing. And this is a huge pitfall in a lot of marriages that fall down these days, is because one or two partners have really put everything they have into, or all their trust, or all their desires, or everything really, their whole life, into the hands of this person who makes mistakes. This person who themselves, has needs as well. So it's really, really important that God really is that foundation of your house, of your relationship. Put it this way, love is not enough, okay? For those of you that were here last week, when Muna came and spoke, she spoke about the chemical process of love. Yeah? Does everyone remember that when she came? She said, basically, when you first, get in a relationship, there's a lot of chemistry going on, right? In your mind, yeah? There's a lot of real, hormones, there's a lot of actual chemicals that are changing your mind that make you so deeply in love with this person, okay? That has an expiry date. And any married couple will tell you this. You will get to a point where you just don't feel for that person the way you did when you first met them. And that's because of the chemistry, okay? Your body cannot sustain those chemicals in your system forever, okay? They have to die down. So something has to take over. You cannot trust in just your feelings. So, now that we've covered when we want to get into a relationship, let's actually talk about how we choose the right person. Okay, so let's assume God is number one in my life. Okay, no one is above him. But how do I actually go about making sure that this person is right for me? Okay, full trust in God, but here's where I need to use my head. Okay, let's look at some of the questions that were asked about finding the one. Okay. So one was, how can I be sure that they are the right person? How do I not view everyone as an option and just leave it all to God and trust that the right person will come in the right time? How do I control my emotions and be logical in choosing the right person? Let's go back to our survey. So I asked a question. How did you know that your spouse was the one? Answers were, I didn't. I trusted God to decide that. I had a feeling he was special. I keep a journal, and in my journal, pretty soon after meeting him, I wrote something along the lines of, I have a good feeling about this, but God, this is up to you. And I trusted that if he was the one, God would free up the path to making that happen, and he really did. It was a lot of trust. Somebody else said, we didn't believe in the idea of the one. We both prayed extensively about it individually and together, but God literally paved the way for us in a way that was clear to us both. We felt we were compatible and shared the same values and views, which ignited how we felt about each other. In saying that, it required a lot of work and effort from both sides. Someone else said, that's a tough one. We prayed together each night from the day we agreed to date until we got married. It was a short 2-minute prayer we had written together, asking God to reveal his will for our lives, and he answered. I had never felt safer or more fulfilled in my life, and things fell into place, and he had my family's blessing. I think he challenged me to be a better person, a better Christian, and I was looking for that and found it in him. I love those answers. Not very practical for you guys, but that's coming. But it just shows that, how much satisfaction these people really had, even though they were really confused about their decision. They didn't know whether it was right or not, right or wrong, but something was pushing them towards that, and that feeling is real if you really have that foundation right. So let's talk about finding your, let's call it the two, because we know that the number one is the one, okay? So we discussed the survey. Okay, so let's talk about the standards that we have for our partner, okay? First of all, 3 standards. The first standard is I must have higher standards on whom I will date. Now, before you start thinking, hang on, is this a checklist now? I have to sit there and think about what are my pros, cons, and do I tick them off? No. We're talking about standards based on your foundation, all right? So basically, your number 2, your partner, must be leading you closer to your number 1, which is God, okay? If you look in Revelations, what did God say about the church that was lukewarm? He said, you were neither cold nor hot, but lukewarm. I will spew you out of my mouth. You find someone that's lukewarm, they're not going to bring you to God, nor will someone that's cold. So basically, the answer to this is your partner must be hot, okay? You have to have high standards and make sure that the partner you find is hot in terms of pursuit of the one. And they must also have that mutual feeling where they hope that you bring them closer to God. And that's why you need to also have that foundation, okay? If you're both not on the same page, there's a crack, okay? The next standard we must have is we need to have higher standards on what I will or will not do, okay? And here's where we get into kind of a bit of the nitty-gritty stuff. 1 Peter says, as obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lusts as in your ignorance, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in your conduct. So let's talk about the things I should or should have been doing. And I'm going to specifically talk about intimacy, all right, in different forms. So let's play a bit of a game. Most of you know that I'm married, okay, kids, I'm very happy. Let's say there's a scenario where, I go out and I'm doing my grocery shopping or whatever it is, and I bump into someone and they say, hey, yeah, I recognise you, you're a friend of a friend or whatever, and this person I met is a guy. We hit it off and, we've got, all these commonalities and we know each other and blah, blah, blah from whatever it was, and there's a spark there, okay? Would it be appropriate if I then said to that person, hey, why don't you come and sleep over tonight? Elmo, okay? All right, that's an easy one. Would it be appropriate if I said to them, hey, you know what, my husband's out of town and the kids are with the grandparents. Do you want to just come over for a coffee? Let's just have a chat. Is it appropriate? It's not appropriate. Forget about that, okay? I want to share something really deep with you. We're not going to go anywhere, we're not going to do anything, but I have a secret that I really want to share with you and nobody knows this about me. Is that appropriate? Okay. If that's not appropriate for me in marriage, while I'm married, why is it appropriate for me outside of my marriage when I'm not married? You following me? If I'm not married, why is that okay? So the standards of what you will do with the person that you marry apply to whether you're married or not. They apply to whether you're 5 years away from marriage, 2 days away from marriage, or 10 years into marriage. The same rules apply. Yeah? So these are the higher standards that we're talking about. Okay? Hebrews 13:4 says marriage is honourable above all. Okay? And it says marriage is honourable not just above married people or people seeking to be married, but all people. Okay? Single, married, 14, whatever it is. Yeah? All right. Let's talk about why. Why? Because one of the questions is later on, I think I haven't put the question up yet, but why is intimacy wrong before marriage? Okay, sure. Yeah, shouldn't do it. Okay. But why? What's the problem? If you look at the model of dating these days, and I'm talking about kind of more the worldly model, think about the scenarios that happen, okay? Boy and girl meet, boy and girl hit it off, boy and girl start dating, want to see how it's going, doing really, really well. 6 months down the track, boy and girl have a fight. Boy and girl realise that there's something about that partner that they're really not happy about. What happens? They fight again, they start to lose those feelings, that chemistry's kind of dwindling down, and then boy and girl break up. Okay? Another year later, boy meets another girl. They hit it off. And the story continues. And this scenario repeats itself until you find the one that's like, no, they're the one, they're absolutely the one, and they get married. What happens when they have problems in marriage? What are they used to doing so much? Breaking up. Yeah? So really, practicing married things before you're married is not conducive to what happens within marriage. Because practicing married things and then breaking up before marriage is actually training you for divorce. Okay? And when you put in intimacy in the mix of all that, remember, we're talking about those chemicals or those hormones that they override sometimes your sense of logic. And they override your objective view of that other person's qualities. Because what you would see in someone else who's not your partner, you could probably say, look, there's a trait there that I think is a bit sketchy. I'd have to look into that, and if it was your best friend, you'd be warning them. You'd be saying, hey man, look out for this guy. There's something going on there that I don't think is good for you. But you don't see that if you're in their position, because you're masked, okay? That intimacy has masked your view of what that person is. Therefore, it makes it really hard for you to pinpoint things like red flags in the relationship. Last week, Mona talked a lot about, couples and why they should really look at counselling before marriage. It's because all couples will have two types of problems: solvable problems and perpetual problems. And it's not to say that the perpetual problems are things that you should, if you have perpetual problems, you need to break it off. No, you need to look at whether those perpetual problems are things that you can actually work through, okay? Physical intimacy, or really any emotional intimacy that's to a high degree, is going to skew your view of what those perpetual problems are going to be. So you could potentially be getting into something that you're not ready to work through because you didn't identify that as an issue before, because you were blinded. Yeah? And I'm going to give you one answer to one of the questions. This is just a snippet of them. When I asked, what advice would you give to those in the pre-dating or dating phase of your life? One of the answers was, avoid emotional and physical fueled communication and contact, as this blurs your vision of the other person. Okay? So there's a reason why the church says that intimacy is wrong prior to marriage. And I will say to you, I will go as far as saying to you this, even before you're engaged even, okay, it's still, problems can still happen in engagement. And any problem that you find within your relationship, being dating or engaged, is actually going to be amplified in marriage. Problems don't go away in marriage. You hear it all the time, but I'm going to tell you from personal experience. Problems get bigger in marriage. Everything gets amplified in marriage. The good gets amplified and the bad gets amplified. So these are things that we need to make sure we iron out prior to making that lifelong commitment. Cool? Okay. Sorry to get that deep, but it's really important. Any questions about that so far? I feel like I'm racing a little bit. No? Okay. Good question. So, things that you wouldn't share with someone who's not your spouse, basically. Okay? Look, and it's a bit of a grey area because it's important to open up emotionally to someone who you're going to tie the knot with, right? Yeah. So it's not so much about, it's about where is that emotional connection going? So what kind of emotional communication is it? Is it about getting to know each other more? Is it about opening up about experiences and wanting to know basically what makes you tick, what doesn't make you tick, you know, what commonalities you have? That stuff is really important to open up about. But if the emotional communication is something that's fueled by that chemistry and you know he's going to lead somewhere, that's often the gate to physical intimacy. Does that answer your question? Cool. Sorry, I can't really think of an example exactly. But... All right. Now, one of the questions that was asked, I'm going to bring it up to you now. I want to discuss it here and not later on. One of the questions was, how far can a couple go physically? Oh, sorry, we've done that. Let's talk about friends. Where should the boundary lie in a male and female friendship? Can you have a best friend of the opposite sex without it being in a relationship? I know this is a little bit sidetrack off the whole relationship stuff, but I want to answer this question because it's something that comes up a lot. And I think a lot of people feel that, you know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a best friend of the opposite sex, okay? I'm going to tell you this. Having a best friend of the opposite sex will either end in marriage or heartbreak, coming from someone who married their best friend, okay? Full disclosure. And what I've seen in close people to me in my life is it goes either way. So again, put those standards on your friendship, okay? And ask yourself these questions if you are in such a friendship, okay? What is the nature of your friendship? Are both of you on the same page about your relationship? Or does one person have different intentions to the other? Okay? Often what you find is that, and this is kind of a typical scenario, but it could happen the other way, is that, you know, the girl really, you know, loves having that guy as a friend, but the guy's like, I'm in the friend zone, this has to go, this has to move on. Okay? Typical scenario. But it happens. It's like, movies are based on real life, yeah? I've seen it happen. So you both have to be on the same page about your intentions. Where is the end point of your friendship? Yeah? And really you need to ask yourself, would I still be having this friendship if I was married? Okay? So really think about that when you have friendships of people in the opposite gender. I'm not saying don't have friends who are guys or girls or like that's so important to have friends of both genders. I'm not going to sit here and like sit in the 1920s and go, you only talk to girls or you only talk to guys if you're the same gender, okay? But we're talking about best friends. We're talking about the number one person that you share, you know, your interests or your life with. You really need to question that friendship, as you should with any of your friendships in your life. And is that friendship, again, coming back to the one, is it bringing you to the one? Is that friendship bringing you closer to God? Because your one is the foundation of all of your relationships, not just your, you know, one-on-one relationship. Okay? I hope that answers that question well. I shouldn't be editing this. Okay. All right, and the next standard, or the third one for this particular category, is I need to have higher standards for what I will expect out of marriage. So basically you need to not settle, okay, for whatever comes your way. Remember, you've put your foundation in the one, in God. He has the ability to do exceedingly abundantly above all that you can ask or think. So if your goal in marriage is to be in a fulfilling relationship, God will give that to you. if you have full faith in him. You don't settle for the person who might need a bit of fixer-uppering because you're anxious about time and that you might not find someone. That's really, really important. Why would you want something that you have to fix and work really, really hard on when God's going to give you something brand new and shiny? Okay? And I'm not saying, please don't misunderstand me as saying you shouldn't date anyone who's never had a relationship before. I'm not saying that at all. Okay? Every situation is on its own, and I truly believe in God's ability to heal people if they have been through bad experiences. Okay? So please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But what I'm saying when I say brand new, I say someone with a brand new heart. Okay? Someone with brand new intention. Someone with who has the one basically as their foundation. So put it this way. Think about the person who will give you anything. Like, say I'm talking like an actual person in your life. Put yourself in this scenario. You have someone, whether it's a parent or a sibling, you go to them for anything and they drop what they're doing and they give it to you tenfold. Everyone got someone like that? I hope so. This person loves you so much they will give you whatever you want, whenever you want, whatever time of day. What's the one scenario that this person will not give you what you want? Okay? When it's bad for you. Or when you're not ready for it. Okay? I'm not going to give you an ice cream because you're lactose intolerant. Right? Even though it looks really good, you're going to pay for it later. So that's God. Okay? He's never ever going to let you settle for something that's not good for you. Malachi 3:17 says, "They shall be mine, says the Lord of hosts. On the day that I make them my jewels, and I will spare them as a man spares his own son who serves him." He has the best plan for you. Okay? All right, survey question. What do you think best prepared you for your relationship? I want to go back to this answer because I think it really applies to this. I never wanted to get married. I had big dreams of working abroad, so I wasn't prepared to like them, let alone love them. God definitely changed my heart, my desires, and answered our prayer when we were both seeking his will. Okay? Remember that answer. This person really, they didn't have any standards really, but they had the foundation, being God as the one, and he showed them exactly what was right for them, and they are in a very, very successful and happy marriage that they work through every day. Okay? How are we going? Am I racing? No? Still got everyone awake? Alright, let's talk about dating. So we've all talked about stuff before dating. Let's get to the nitty-gritty. Alright. Question about dating stigma. There was a couple. Okay? So there's a stigma around getting engaged and breaking it off, but the church says dating is wrong. How am I supposed to be sure before getting engaged so my reputation isn't harmed? How should we approach dating in the community? Some people don't like the idea of dating someone who has already dated another person in the same parish, especially if they're all friends. Okay. So I think we've touched on some of how to answer this, but I want to go into this particular issue of the stigma. First of all, let's define dating. Okay? The church does not say dating is wrong. Let's just get that out there, okay? The church says that the world's view of dating is wrong. So the scenario I gave you before where boy meets girl, just want to flesh it out, see how it's going. No real intentions, we're not going anywhere, don't want to take it slow, don't even talk about marriage, okay? That's the kind of dating that the church says you don't just go and fool around, okay? That's like ABC of dating. If you're going dating just for the intention to fool around, tonight's not for you, okay? Let me just put it out there. So what I really want to talk about is courtship. And the church does not disagree with courtship, okay? Courtship is basically that period of time where you're, getting to know someone before you're engaged. The intentions in courtship, let me just say, are actually the same as your intentions in engagement. You want to marry this person, or you're working towards marrying this person, okay? So you're getting to know them, you know, you're having kind of emotional connection, but you're also fleshing out what they're all about and what potential issues you might have that you need to work through and figure out if that's something that you can continue through marriage, okay? So that's not something that the church is against. In actual fact, that's something that's really, really important, okay? Because nobody these days goes and just finds someone and says, let's get engaged tomorrow and then we'll work things through, okay? We don't do arranged marriages anymore, right? Not here anyway. So let's just get that definition out. So the stigma is basically about all of that, sleeping over, moving in, doing married life things before you're married. Okay, that's the stigma that the church has, but none of us are looking for that at the moment. So you need to ask yourself, what are the reasons for you dating? So are the reasons for you dating because, you know, I'm ready to settle down. You know, I'm really ready to slow down and have a family and stop this, you know, this rat race, and, you know, I'm ready to share my life with someone. Getting into a relationship is much, much, much more about what you are willing to give than what you are willing to receive. Think back to one of those answers that we had of, let me get back to it. You know, why you got into the relationship, or how did you know you were ready for it? Yeah. I realised I was ready when I discovered that I had more to give someone and that I could commit to the growth of something mutual. Okay? A relationship is so much more about what you give than what you receive. Case in point. Later down the marriage, say you get married, happy marriage, what happens after marriage usually a few years later on? Kids. Do you think kids give you anything at the start? Man, I could sit here and talk your ear off about how much I just give and give and give, that these kids just continue taking, sucking everything out of me, right? Getting into a relationship and getting into marriage is really preparing you for giving more of your life to the people you love. It is so much less about how much you receive. And I'm not saying that you are not going to receive anything, because the receiving is actually the result of the giving. Without you giving to your partner, fiance, spouse, kids, you will not receive anything. Yeah? And it's really God that is able to give you that sense of giving. It is more blessed to give than to receive. That comes from God, and that comes from the foundation of having Him as the one. Let me just get back down to my points. All right. Okay, let's talk about the reputation. This whole idea of reputations, and I'm probably not the right one, because I'm pretty sure there was, you know, words going around when I was back in the day, you know, but then again, there was, you know, talk about pretty much a lot of people, okay? Let's be honest, okay? People like to talk about other people, especially when it comes to that phase of your life when you're getting into a relationship, okay? You need to, I guess, have more of an open mind about your relationship. And you need to be a bit more, I'm going to say it, thick-skinned, because if you're getting into a relationship for the right intentions, the reputation is not something that's going to affect you. I'd even go so far as to say, if your intentions are right, really, like I mean really right, like you've got the foundation down pat, and your intentions are really, really good, often the reputation doesn't follow that. The reputation follows when, you know, the people that are kind of mucking around, or like, you know, trial it out, get rid of it if it's not working, and they continue on that cycle, okay? You need to be more concerned about what God thinks of you first, what your close-knit circle, your family, your close friends think about you, because that's important. That will come up a little bit later as well. And then that person, okay, so your partner. They're the three most important categories of people that you should more be worried about when it comes to your reputation, okay? Because they're going to know you more intimately and really know your heart when it comes to your period of courtship, okay? Okay, intimacy, we've covered that, I guess. Let's talk about family. This is where kind of my slides end. Oh, no, I've got a little bit. Okay. Question of family or external input. What is the role of the parents in their child's relationship? Is there such a thing as being too involved or even not involved enough? Yes, last week Mona talked a little bit about this, and I think there was a question about how do you know that there might be certain issues, and how do you, if you've got those rose-coloured glasses on still. And she mentioned that you really should be talking to somebody else that you really trust about your relationship, okay? Your relationship should not operate as a silo. It's not just you and that person, really, okay? There are people around you that love you and want the best of you, and they should really help to guide you. In saying that, your family or your close friends should be consultants, not mediators. So it is really important to take their opinion, because they're not going to be looking at things with rose-coloured glasses on. But the minute they start to interfere within your relationship, that's where you need to start setting some boundaries, okay? Because it's these blurred boundaries that can often affect relationships and marriages if they're not set properly from the get-go, okay? Let me give you a bit of a scenario that I witnessed in a relationship. So, guy and a girl, they're engaged, okay? This guy, true story, this guy is studying and working at the same time, still lives with his parents. Girl is with her parents in another city, but fairly close by, and they often visit each other. Parents are completely supportive of the relationship, so when she comes over, she stays over because she lives 5 hours away, but she stays in a separate room and the parents are all okay with it. So it's all above board, okay? This is a very, innocent scenario. What happened to this guy was that there was a period where he was going through exams, but at the same time they were getting a lot of visitors, overseas visitors that were kind of coming and staying with them. So there was a lot of disruption in the house, and he's the kind of laid-back kind of guy that's like, yeah, it's all good, let them take my room, I'll just sleep on the couch, it's all good, I'll just go study at uni, whatever it is. So he doesn't mind so much about it, it's not an issue to him. She's a very, let's say she cares a lot about his future career, okay? As she should, as a future spouse, okay? She thinks it's really inappropriate that their parents are not doing anything about it. They're not really giving or making, what am I trying to say? They're not giving him the best environment that he should be having come exam time. Why are they letting people take your room? You should be studying. Why are they allowing this to happen? They're not saying anything about it, okay? He's like, don't worry about it, it's all good. Like, what's the problem? So what happens next? She goes and talks to his mum, okay? And she sends him a text, and she sends her a text and says, I think it's really inappropriate that you're doing this. He needs to study. You know that he needs kind of quiet. Why are you letting this happen? Okay, mum has options of how she deals with the scenario, okay? If mum was a meddler, mum would react to her straight away. It's none of your business. He's my son. He doesn't care anyway. You know what he's like. He's fine. He's just goes to uni. Why are you interfering? Okay. If mum didn't care at all, she'd just ignore it. Never happened. Whatever. It's a text. I never got it. Okay. What this mum actually did in that scenario was she approached her son. Okay. She didn't approach her son in a way that was, look at what your fiancé is saying. How dare she? No. You know what she said to him? She said, hey son, can you just have a read of this text? And that's it. Okay? So she, mind you, he didn't know that his fiancée sent that text to his mum. Okay? She's bringing it to his attention. So she cares enough for him to know what's going on. He needs to know what's going on between his mum and his fiancée. He should not be kept out of the loop. So she's doing the right thing there by telling him. But did she interfere? Did she meddle? Did she go and say she shouldn't be saying this, or did she go and confront his fiancée? No. And that is a perfect example of good boundaries when it comes to family. Okay? Very, very, very important. I will say to you, make sure you consult with someone that you really trust. And if it's not someone, family or friends or anyone like that, it needs to be a spiritual guide, someone that you trust, that you know will be looking out for you, rain, hail or shine. It is so important, because you do miss things, you do not see things that you will see later on in marriage. Okay? Marriage amplifies everything. Okay? All right, let's move on. All right, let's talk about marriage-related stuff. So we've kind of covered pre-dating, dating. Let's cover some of the questions that we had when it comes to marriage. No, that's where my slides are. Anyway, it's all good. Sorry, I didn't get to typing up the rest of them. So there is a question about the wedding ceremony. This might get a bit controversial, but I want to read some stuff to you guys. So the question goes like this. Isn't it about time we change the wedding ceremony readings to update them for the modern world? It's embarrassing when we sound like we're in the past. No one is calling their husband master. Okay. Before I address this question, I just want to say that it's really important to approach these things with the intention of understanding, not combating. Okay? There's a reason the church puts things in readings the way they're put. Okay? Let's actually go and see what the actual wording is in that part of the ceremony. Coptic reader. So if anyone's got Coptic reader, you can have a look at the crowning ceremony. And the parts I'm actually going to read to you is that particular one. So the instructions to the bride, instructions to the groom. And this is what they're really referring to. So let's go to the crowning ceremony. If anyone's got it, feel free. Or if you want to cast. Loading. Okay. Okay, so in the crowning, it's after the gospel, after the prayers and the melodies, the command. So basically chapter 52, if you're on Coptic reader. 52 is command to the bridegroom, and 53 is command to the bride. Let's actually go through the command to the bride first. I want to answer this question, and then we can talk about the groom. So the command to the bride says this. And you, blessed daughter and happy bride, you have heard what was commanded of your husband. So you are required to honour and respect him. Do not act against his opinion, but increase your obedience to him, many times over what was commanded. For today you are alone with him, and he is responsible for you instead of your parents. You must receive him with joy and cheer. You do not frown in his face, do not neglect any of his rights upon you, and fear God in all matters with him. Because God commanded you to submit to him and ordered you to obey him as your parents, so be with him as our mother Sarah was obedient to our father Abraham and used to address him as my Lord, or master, as this person is referring to. Thus God looked upon her obedience to him, blessed her, gave her Isaac in her old age, and made her offspring as the stars of heaven and the sand of the seashore. Let's stop it there. Is the church telling us to call our husband masters? The church is giving us an example of Sarah, who was obedient to the point where she felt she wanted to call him my Lord. Okay? Wording, communication was different back then. They used different words. Sounds really funny now, but that was her way of showing him, hey, I really support and respect you. And because you've provided me with so much, I'm going to be obedient to you. Okay? You're going to ask me, "Oh, what's this like blind obedience?" Okay, come on now, we're in the 21st century. Let's go back to the commandment to the groom. So chapter 52. I'm going to read it to you. "My blessed son, who is supported by the grace of the Holy Spirit, you are required to receive your wife at this blessed hour with a clear conscience, a pure soul, and a full heart. Excel in doing all that is good for her. Have compassion on her and hasten to do that which will gladden her heart. Today you are responsible for her instead of her parents. You have both been crowned with a heavenly crowning and the spiritual marriage. The grace of God is settled upon you. When you accept what has been commanded of you, the Lord will take your hand, increase your livelihood, grant you blessed children, which God will delight, and give you long age, prosperous life, and prosper in this life and the hereafter." Tell me, ladies, if you had someone that did all that for you, like as if you wouldn't support him, okay? Someone who hastens to gladden your heart. Someone who doesn't talk to you with condescension. Someone who doesn't mock you in contention. Someone who doesn't roll their eyes at you. Someone who really looks at you like they want to give you their whole world. This person is going to have every single one of your best interests at heart. You're going to want to, do everything. You're going to want to reciprocate that, okay? And as it was commanded of Eve to obey, that's what's commanded of the wives, because this is what the husband will do for you, okay? When you start talking about, dysfunctional, abusive stuff, that's a separate issue, okay? And that's where you need external input and you need guidance there. But when it comes to both parties, when you actually fulfill these commandments, marriage runs really, really smoothly, even through the problems. And let me say this to you, ladies. Be careful not to wait for your partner or your husband to lay down their life for you, okay? I'm going to say that. Yes, sorry. Because you need to try and have that supportive role, even if they haven't quite got to that point that they want to lay down their life for you. Because it works kind of like an equilibrium. The more the husband lays down his life, the more the wife wants to support and obey. And the more the wife wants to support and obey, the more the husband wants to lay down his life. It works both ways, okay? This guy sounds like a knight in shining armour, and this lady sounds like every guy's dream, okay? And that's what you want to aspire to. I heard a contemplation about basically the fall of the first sin, the original sin. And the contemplation was that the sins of Adam and Eve were actually two separate ones. Eve's sin was rebellion. Adam's sin was passivity. Okay? Eve rebellion, why? Because there was a commandment given to her and she rebelled against it. Adam, passivity, why? He was given the commandment, he gave it to Eve and then followed through when she broke it. That's passive. That's passivity. That's not being a good leader. That's not being a good head of the household. Okay? And those sins are the opposite of what's commanded to us in marriage, in the marriage ceremony. Instead of rebelling, wives obey. And instead of being passive, you lay down your life for your wife with fervour. So when you really look into the wording and want to try and understand what the church is saying, it's not set back in the Stone Ages. It is relevant today. And it's going to be relevant for the next 1,000 years. Okay? Let's look at Ephesians. Chapter 5, verse 22 to 33. Can we just have a quick read of that? If anyone would like to read, that would be wonderful, because I feel like I've been talking for too long. So Ephesians chapter 5, and this is the reading that's read in the Pauline at the marriage ceremony. We're actually going to study Ephesians during the Bible study, so it's really exciting to actually hear it from a Warner when he gets to this point. Has anyone got it? Or anyone want to read it? Yeah? So 22 to 33. Hey, do you need a microphone? You want to go to it? Yeah. Sorry, can you go from 21?
Submitting to one another in the fear of God, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church, and he is the Saviour of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one has hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. For we are members of his body and of his flesh and of his bones. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh.
So, this is the reading that's given at the crowning ceremony. Can I just pinpoint one thing, because I kind of like numbers sometimes. How many verses is the wife's commandment, the commandment to the wife? Verse 22 to 24, 3 verses. How many verses is he commanding the husbands? 25 to 33, the rest of the chapter. Okay. There's actually, and I feel like it's the feminist movement that has sparked this, view of women being oppressed in the church. There is a far greater responsibility that's put upon the husband. Let's be honest about it, okay? Guys, I don't envy you, okay? Because when the husband can fulfill all of these things, all of these 8 verses full of commandments, those 3 verses for women become really, really easy. And I'm telling you from experience, okay? Remember verse 21, the first verse that Amanda actually read. And this is where it's really important that we understand this verse, is submitting to one another in the fear of God. Essentially, it's not about me to you or you to me. It's to each other as we do to God. As the church submits to Christ, that's how we submit to each other. Does Christ view the church as inferior to him? As a lesser entity to him? He called us brothers. So how can we feel that within marriage there is an oppression of one particular spouse? It's not truth. It's an idea that has been born from very recent extremist movements, okay? And I just want to get that out there, because especially talking to, especially young teenage girls or people, growing up and hearing things from the outside world, we're actually really oppressed, and the church really doesn't, give 2 stuffs about women. No, guys, it's equality. We are equal, but we have different roles. And that's a topic for a whole other day. I'm not going to get too much more into it there. But I just hope that answered that question. I really wanted to touch on that because I think it's really, really important. Okay. There was just a little... Actually, I won't go there. What I might do is there have been a couple of extra questions. I'll have a look and see if it's anything I can do on the spot. But apart from that, I might need to wrap up because I don't want to talk your ears off. Ooh, okay. Okay. I want to answer these. How much time you guys got, though? Okay, I might not all of them. Sorry. Go for it. Okay. Okay, I'm going to address this one first. What are red flags in a relationship, and how do you spot them? How long is a piece of string? Basically is what I'm going to ask you. What I want to say about this is I personally feel, and I know lots of other couples that will vouch for this, if you are in a dating or engaged relationship that's leading to marriage, you should get counselling. Whether you've got problems, whether you don't. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Because through counselling or through talking to like someone who knows how to find these things, that's how you can really assess your relationship. Okay, I'm talking practical here, okay? Obviously the spiritual stuff, we've kind of addressed that, all right? We've already ascertained we've got the spiritual stuff down pat. When it comes to practicality, there are experts. Why would you not invest in something that's going to overtake your whole life for the rest of your life? Why not invest now? We put so much planning and so much work into the wedding day. It's like 12 hours, guys, relative to the rest of your life. And people will tell you, the wedding was bliss, perfect. I don't know what happened after we got married. That period of time before marriage is not just to prepare for the wedding. That's to prepare for your marriage. So counselling, and mind you, I mean, I didn't do it. I wish I did, okay? I'm speaking honestly with you. I really wish I did it beforehand, because the issues we ended up having, we really had to work harder at them after marriage, okay? But through the grace of God, God works in mysterious ways, okay? And he wants the best for all of us. Sorry, I locked again. I'm not keeping it alive. So, I personally believe it is so important to invest in premarital counselling. Okay, that's my personal opinion, and I think that's how you will find a lot of flags for you, because I believe that red flags are individual. A red flag for me might not be a red flag for Jonah. Okay, might be totally different. So you've got to really see what makes you tick, what issues you have within your relationship that could potentially be perpetual issues. Okay? How do you make a long-distance relationship work? Okay. I feel like the same rules apply with long distance. Long distance obviously has its extra difficulties because you're not together. We don't see each other often. And it's harder to communicate. But I will also say that sometimes, you know, some people will say it's better because you're not tempted, for example, and you're not, can't kind of get into those curly situations where you really shouldn't be doing what you're doing. I think sometimes that's harder in long distance because you don't want to confront issues. Because it's harder to communicate, or you're communicating less frequently. Well, since I can only talk to you for 10 minutes tonight, I'm not going to bring up the issues. Let's talk about good stuff. Don't worry about the stuff that makes us frustrated. We can figure that out later. And a lot of long-distance relationships actually fall into this trap. So I think the same rules always apply in a long-distance relationship, but essentially you're going to need some period of time where you're in closer proximity to figure out whether a relationship is going to work or not. Okay? That's kind of how I could answer it now. I don't have much experience with long-distance relationships, but that's probably how I would answer that question. So I hope that answers that one. Okay. Back to the best friends question. What if you've had that conversation and they say that they see you just as a friend, but you know they're still interested? What do I do? I have confronted them and told my spiritual guide, but they're still full on. Okay, so obviously we've ascertained that you both don't have the same intentions. I think what matters here is where your intention is. So if you are adamant, no, don't want this to go anywhere, I just want it to stay as friends, then I'm sorry to say, but this might be one of those scenarios where the friendship ends in heartache. Because it's not going to work as a best friend scenario when you have different intentions. Sorry. Okay? I'm going to give you my experience. I wanted it just to be best friends. Okay? Talking about my personal experience. I didn't want it to go anywhere else. Okay? But then there were different intentions, and we figured that out. Now, it took me a lot of guidance from my spiritual guide and a lot of talking to the person that I really trust, or people, I would say, to get me to a point where I felt that, hey, I think this is coming from somewhere. I think God's trying to talk to me. Okay? That might be a bit of a different scenario, but that's why I say the best friends either end up in marriage or heartache. Okay? And for me, the rest was history. That really was the calling from God. I kind of was putting the walls up, but God's saying, no, this is what you need to pursue. But if your intention is not going to change, or you're not even open for it to changing, you're probably better off doing something about it before it gets too late. Full stop. I hope I'm not rustling people up the wrong way, but I like to be a bit candid about this kind of stuff. Okay. What if you have had past intimacy, so sexual intimacy, in a prior relationship? What happens then? Okay. Before I mentioned to you guys that I don't think it's... Sorry, I'll say that louder. What if you have had past sexual intimacy in a prior relationship? What happens then? Guys, don't underestimate the power of repentance. If it's something that you truly feel was a mistake, and it was something that you really, really regret doing, and it was something that you know you want to try not to happen, and you really want to, you wish you could, turn back time and erase it, repentance is a powerful thing. And there's something so freeing about knowing you've done something that you would never forgive yourself about, but having God say, I forgive you. And if you truly have that repentance in your heart, then the right person for you, or the person that God calls for you, will also forgive you. I've heard of relationships who have been in a similar scenario where one has had intimacy before and the other one hasn't. They ended up happily married because the person who had that previous intimacy was really remorseful and actually really repentant. And the other person didn't just, that's a huge thing, okay? If I've saved myself, why should I settle for someone who hasn't saved themselves? It took a lot of work for that person to forgive the other person, but they did, and they're happily married. It can still work, okay? There's light at the end of the tunnel. So don't despair. Please don't despair. We all fall. We all make mistakes. You obviously need to be really careful about making any type of mistake in a relationship, but there's always repentance, and don't forget that. Okay? I love the verse that says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So put yourself in the shoes of that person who Christ is hanging on the tree for. Okay? He forgives you. Okay, the last one from tonight is, what is the boundary between involving friends in my relationships, whether it be romantic or family relationships? So I'm assuming this question is asking, how much do I involve my friends' input in my other relationships? So that's how I'm going to answer that question. I think similar rules apply for how you choose your friends to how you choose your partner. That friend needs to be a positive influence in your life, and that friend needs to be someone who's bringing you towards the one. If they are, then they fall into that similar category of family's involvement in your relationships. They should have a consultative role, but not a mediating role. Yeah? So they should be encouraging you, discouraging you, advising you, guiding you, giving their take on what your other relationships are like. But they should not be forcing you into doing something you don't want to do or something that you think is wrong. And they shouldn't be interfering 100%. Okay? All of this stuff needs a lot of spiritual guidance. Okay? And I think there's nothing more important than having a spiritual guide to guide you through these sorts of things as well. Because if you put your friends' opinions above everything else to guide you with your other relationships, you're putting that friendship above God's input in your life, which we want to avoid. I might stop it there. There was a few questions that were previous from the last week or so, but I think that's probably enough for tonight. They were more kind of got to do with some other unrelated stuff anyway. So, but I'm happy to come back and talk about those last few questions again, if you guys want me to. But we should probably wrap it up. Thank you for having me. Sorry if I didn't answer anything. I did the best that I can. May God help you.
I have to think, Dimyana, it's not